The story opens with Bob Lee Swagger, a skilled hunter, moving silently through the forest. He is focused on tracking his prey when he stumbles upon an unexpected sight, a wolf trapped in a hunter's snare. Recognizing the wolf as a protected animal, Bob quickly rushes to free it. Just as he is about to help, two armed hunters appear and order him to stay away. Bob refuses to back down. The hunters, feeling challenged, attack him. However, Bob's experience as a retired United States Marine Special Forces member gives him the upper hand. He swiftly and effortlessly defeats them. With the danger gone, Bob releases the wolf and heads back to his home, where he lives peacefully with his wife, Julie, and their young daughter, Mary. A few days later, Bob receives an unexpected visit from Isaac Johnson, an old friend and his former superior from his Marine Corps days. Isaac comes with a serious request. He needs Bob's help to track down a sniper who recently assassinated a CIA agent from an incredible distance of 1.5 kilometers. Bob, once a legendary sniper scout, is one of the few people skilled enough to understand such a shot. Isaac explains that the sniper left a chilling message on the victim's body. The note revealed that the assassin's next target is the President of the United States. Isaac believes that only a handful of marksmen are capable of such a shot. One is Bob himself, and the other is Salatov, Bob's former rival. A flashback reveals Bob's painful memory. Years ago, Bob and his partner, Donnie Finn, were on a mission to capture Salatov. But Bob miscalculated their approach, exposing their position. Salatov opened fire, killing Donnie and gravely injuring Bob. The tragedy led Bob to retire from the Marines, and the guilt over Donnie's death still haunts him. Meanwhile, FBI agent Nadine Memphis is on a mission of her own. She arranges to meet a Russian informant who claims to have critical information about her case. However, just as she arrives, agents from Homeland Security appear and take control, arresting the informant. Memphis, bound by protocol, can only watch. Before being taken, the informant discreetly gives Memphis a cryptic code, leaving her confused about its meaning. The next day, Bob meets with Isaac again and is introduced to Jack Payne, Isaac's subordinate. Bob agrees to help catch Salatov and begins his preparation. Soon, Isaac provides him with key details: the location where the president will appear, recent photos of Salatov, and possible weapons Salatov might use. In the end, Bob requests time to study the site, analyze potential shooting positions, and consider the sniper's tactics. Bob spends the next few days carefully observing the area. He examines vantage points, calculates distances, and assesses possible ambush spots. After completing his analysis, he reports back to Isaac and Payne, sharing his findings and preparing for the dangerous task ahead. The appointed day arrived, and the president's convoy of cars approached the location. Bob, keeping a close watch on the crowd, received an urgent call from Payne. At one moment, Payne informed him that Salatov was nowhere to be found in the expected location. Realizing something was wrong, Bob quickly recalculated Salatov's potential position. His heart pounded as he dashed through the crowd, updating Payne with his new assessment. But when Bob reached the recalculated spot, he found only an abandoned sniper rifle. Salatov had vanished. Suddenly, gunshots echoed. Turning to a nearby television broadcast, Bob was horrified to learn that the President of the United States had been shot. Panic turned to shock when a police officer suddenly appeared and aimed at Bob. In that moment, Bob realized the terrible truth: he had been framed. Isaac and Payne had set him up as the scapegoat for the assassination. Acting fast, Bob dodged the gunfire by leaping out a nearby window, only to be apprehended shortly after by Agent Memphis, who had been nearby. As a result, Bob was thrown into prison, awaiting trial as the prime suspect in the assassination case. Life behind bars was harsh, and Bob faced bullying from other inmates. He was saved by Alex, a powerful Russian crime boss who was also imprisoned. Alex had seen the news and believed Bob had killed the president of Ukraine, something many in Russia had secretly desired. From Alex, Bob learned the shocking truth. The real victim was not the U.S. president, but the president of Ukraine. Bob began to suspect that Isaac and Payne were part of a secret plot, working with others to carry out the assassination while setting him up as the fall guy. Meanwhile, Agent Memphis, growing suspicious of the case, visited Bob's wife, Julie. Her interview with Julie only deepened her doubts. Something didn't add up, and Memphis resolved to uncover the real story. Back in prison, Bob faced a brutal ambush from inmates and guards, all acting under Payne's orders. Drawing on his survival skills, Bob fought them off and seized the chance to escape, disguising himself as one of the guards. Knowing the authorities would watch his home and familiar haunts, Bob fled to the home of Donnie's mother. She greeted him warmly and, believing in his innocence, offered her help. Meanwhile, Isaac and the police scrambled to locate Bob. Isaac suspected Bob might seek refuge with Donnie's mother. But when they arrived, Bob had already fled on Donnie's motorcycle. That night, Bob secretly watched his home from the shadows. He called Julie, assuring her of his safety and vowing to uncover the mastermind behind the assassination and expose those who had framed him. Knowing that Agent Memphis and her team had tapped Julie's cell phone, Bob quickly ended the call, apologizing to his wife. Meanwhile, Isaac and his team, including Payne, planned to use Bob's family as bait to lure him out hiding. One day, while Julie was shopping at the supermarket, Bob called her again. However, Isaac and Agent Memphis quickly detected the call and ordered their team to keep Julie under close surveillance. During the call, a stranger accidentally bumped into Julie, spilling coffee on her clothes. Julie went to the restroom to clean up, where Bob was already waiting. He warned her about the corrupt police officers who were trying to kill him and urged her to be cautious. Bob left quickly to avoid being captured by federal agents. Feeling that she could trust Agent Memphis, Julie later confided in her about the mercenary policeman involved in the assassination plot. Agent Memphis began investigating the mercenary cop, eventually tracking him down. However, her questioning led nowhere, and the man left without revealing anything. Payne, fearing exposure, kidnapped and killed the mercenary to keep his crimes hidden. The next day, Bob visited an old friend who worked as a prosthetic bone maker at a veterans hospital. At that moment, Bob requested a titanium bone with a serial number matching his own. Though hesitant due to Bob's fugitive status, the man eventually agreed and provided the titanium bone. With the titanium bone in hand, Bob retreated to a secluded cabin in the forest. There, he prepared traps, anticipating Isaac and his team would soon come for him. Isaac eventually learned of Bob's location and quickly mobilized his team, including Agent Memphis, to capture him. Upon arriving at the cabin, they found it empty. Unbeknownst to them, Bob had set an ambush. Hidden at a distance, he opened fire. In response, Isaac grabbed a nearby weapon and shot back, eventually hitting Bob and causing him to fall. When Isaac and Agent Memphis examined the body, they found the titanium bone with Bob's serial number. They assumed Bob had succumbed to despair and staged his own death as doing the unthinkable. However, while searching the cabin for clues, Agent Memphis received a call from Bob. He revealed that he had faked his death to investigate freely and uncover the true mastermind behind the assassination. A few days later, Payne visited Agent Memphis in her office. He informed her that the Russian informant she had been pursuing was killed by the Russian mob. In reality, Payne had murdered the man to cover his tracks. This news deepened Agent Memphis's suspicions, hinting at a connection between the informant's death and Bob's case. Elsewhere, Julie held a funeral for Bob. Donnie's mother attended, mourning alongside her, unaware that Bob was still alive and determined to expose the conspiracy against him. On the other hand, Isaac and his superior, Hugh Meacham, a CIA Black Ops operative, suspected that Donnie's mother knew about the conspiracy they had orchestrated to frame Bob. Fearing exposure, Isaac decided he had no choice but to eliminate her. The scene then flashes back to Isaac's time in the Marines. Isaac was assigned a mission to execute Mullah, a notorious terrorist responsible for numerous murders. However, Meacham, serving as an advisor on the mission, instructed Isaac to capture Mullah alive. The CIA believed Mullah possessed crucial information that could help dismantle terrorist networks. Unexpectedly, the mission took a dark turn when one of Isaac's men betrayed him, handing Isaac over to Mullah to be executed. Just as Isaac faced death, Bob and Donnie, serving as snipers, intervened and saved him, killing the terrorists in the process. Despite being rescued, Isaac was blamed for negligence and dismissed from service. Meacham then offered Isaac a higher position if he agreed to work with him in secret operations. Although Isaac owed his life to Donnie, he felt compelled to kill Donnie's mother, as she refused to stay silent about Bob's case. Meanwhile, Agent Memphis met with Payne, who promised to hand over files about the murdered Russian informant. But Payne had a darker plan. He drugged Agent Memphis and held her captive in her own home, intending to stage her death as doing the unthinkable. At the critical moment, Bob appeared and rescued her, taking Payne by surprise and overpowering him. Bob revealed that he had been secretly watching Agent Memphis to ensure she wasn't involved with Isaac and Payne. However, Payne managed to escape, learning in the process that Bob had faked his death. Realizing his cover was blown, Bob asked Agent Memphis to work with him as an informant to uncover the conspiracy behind the assassination of the Ukrainian president. Through detailed investigation, Bob discovered that the bullet evidence collected by the CIA had been tampered with. He reenacted the shooting, calculating the bullet's trajectory and determining that the real bullet was lodged inside a nearby police patrol car present during the assassination. Bob tracked the car to a garage. Disguising himself as a mechanic, he inspected the vehicle and successfully retrieved the real bullet. He left the garage before anyone noticed his true identity. Later, Bob presented the bullet to Agent Memphis, and together they discovered it originated from the Tree of Liberty, a rebel group seeking a revolution in the United States. Determined to expose the truth, Bob set off to a remote hideout used by Tree of Liberty members. At first, the members of the Tree of Liberty were wary of Bob's arrival. However, their attitude changed when James Richards, the group's leader, greeted Bob warmly and welcomed him. Bob explained the purpose of his visit and showed James the bullet he had found. James examined it, but insisted it didn't come from anyone in their group. When Bob asked about the supplier who provided their bullets, James refused to reveal any information. Meanwhile, Isaac, now aware that Bob was still alive, tried to track him down. His search led him to a car repair shop and eventually to the Tree of Liberty's hideout. Isaac approached the base alone and observed from a distance, but he was soon discovered and brought before James and Bob. At that moment, Bob quickly clarified that he had no ties with Isaac. James, seeing Isaac as a threat, ordered his execution and suggested that Bob should carry it out. Out of a lingering sense of duty, Bob deliberately missed his shot, hoping to attract the attention of Isaac's men who were on the route. His plan worked, and soon Isaac's men stormed the hideout, sparking chaos. Tree of Liberty members scattered and fought back. During the confusion, Isaac managed to escape, while Bob stayed to help defend the hideout. He saved James' brother from being shot, earning James' trust. In gratitude, James revealed the name of the bullet supplier, a man named O'Brien. Elsewhere, Agent Memphis met with Bob's wife, Julie. She revealed her suspicions about Payne's involvement in the conspiracy framing Bob. Concerned for her family's safety, Julie decided to take action. She spoke to media reporters gathered outside her home, exposing Payne's potential role in the conspiracy. Her aim was to attract public attention and restrict Payne's movements. Later, Payne approached Agent Memphis and turned himself in. During his interrogation, he denied any involvement in the Russian informant's murder and Bob's framing. Believing Memphis lacked solid evidence, Payne attempted to clear his name. Yet he provided two cryptic clues to aid the investigation: Meacham and Annex B. Meanwhile, Isaac, having escaped the Tree of Liberty hideout, met with Meacham and reported Payne's surrender. They swiftly arranged for military personnel to take custody of Payne. Moments later, soldiers arrived to retrieve Payne, claiming the military would handle the case and conduct a court-martial for Payne's ethical violations. Despite Agent Memphis' objections, they took Payne away, leaving her frustrated and uncertain. Meanwhile, Bob tracked down O'Brien, his former shooting instructor. Bob explained the situation and showed him the bullet. O'Brien confirmed that the bullet was not standard. It had been modified to shatter on impact, erasing any trace. To provide more insight, O'Brien led Bob to a hilltop and introduced him to a sniper rifle called the Black King. Judging by the bullet's characteristics and the shooting distance, O'Brien concluded that the assassin had used a Black King rifle. O'Brien then advised Bob that to find the shooter, he needed to locate the person who owned the Black King rifle. In the end, O'Brien explained that there were only 4 Black King rifles in existence. Not long after, O'Brien received a warning from a friend that a group of military vehicles was heading toward his home. Anticipating the danger, O'Brien instructed Bob to prepare for the incoming mercenaries. Moments later, some of the attackers were caught and injured by traps O'Brien had set earlier, while Bob and O'Brien used their rifles to take down the rest. After successfully defeating the attackers, Bob prepared to leave and continue his investigation. Before he left, O'Brien gifted Bob his Black King rifle, along with a box of bullets, considering Bob his best student. Meanwhile, Payne was released by Lon Scott, the CEO of Dynamics. Payne demanded money from Lon Scott, claiming that he possessed Annex B, evidence of a massacre in a remote Ukrainian village committed by a private military group supplied by Dynamics. This evidence implicated Lon Scott in the assassination of a Ukrainian president. However, Lon Scott rejected Payne's request, stating that he was unconcerned about the massacre video, even though it could lead to his prosecution for war crimes. Elsewhere, Agent Memphis continued her investigation, focusing on Dimitri's acquaintance, a key witness who knew about Annex B. Agent Memphis met with a woman named Casper, who initially refused to cooperate, but eventually agreed to connect her with the informant, a woman residing in Russia. Through a video call, the informant revealed information about Annex B, explaining that Dimitri had been targeted by various parties, including the Russian military. However, just as the informant was about to reveal the mastermind behind the massacre, the Russian military tracked her down and killed her in front of Agent Memphis, cutting off the connection. Meanwhile, Bob searched for information about the Black King rifle. He attended an exhibition showcasing the weapon and discovered that Lon Scott owned one. Bob learned that Scott was an expert sniper, capable of hitting targets from over a kilometer away. Bob then shared his findings with Agent Memphis, asking her to meet him. He explained the details of Annex B and Scott's involvement in the assassination. Later, Bob and Agent Memphis observed Lon Scott meeting with Hugh Meacham and Grigory Krukov, a Russian FSB agent. During their conversation, it became clear that Krukov had ordered Meacham and Scott to assassinate the Ukrainian president. They also discussed Payne's blackmail attempts regarding Annex B, but Krukov dismissed Payne's demands and left the meeting. Having listened in on their conversation, Bob came up with a plan to pit them against each other, using Payne as bait. Bob and Agent Memphis met with Krukov and proposed a deal. At that moment, Bob offered to eliminate Meacham, Lon Scott, and Payne in exchange for the same payment Payne had demanded. Although Krukov was skeptical, suspecting Bob wasn't motivated by money, Bob convinced him by claiming he needed the funds to move his family abroad and start anew. Elsewhere, Julie decided to secretly leave her sister's house to find a safer place. She managed to slip away with her daughter, but shortly after, 2 men arrived at her sister's home. Pretending to be journalists wanting to interview Julie, they were actually agents working for Lon Scott. Their real mission was to kidnap Julie and Bob's daughter, Mary. Unable to find Julie, they secretly tapped her sister's phone to track her movements. Later that night, Bob and Agent Memphis visited Lon Scott's house. Agent Memphis distracted the guards while Bob sneaked inside. Bob wanted to prove to Lon Scott that his skills surpassed Lon's and that he could eliminate him anytime. To stir distrust, Bob handed over a recording of his conversation with Krukov, hinting at mutual suspicion. Before leaving, Bob challenged Lon Scott indirectly by saying he would take down Krukov and suggested that Lon should also be there when Payne dealt with Krukov. This was Bob's way of baiting Lon Scott into a sniper confrontation, knowing that Lon was eager to outdo him. The day of the exchange between Payne and Krukov arrived. Bob positioned himself strategically, while Agent Memphis took her place to assist. However, Bob noticed Isaac hiding in Payne's car, preparing to shoot. Realizing the need for a new plan, Bob moved closer to the action while Agent Memphis created a diversion by firing at the enemies. The group took cover, and when Lon Scott realized that the shooter was Agent Memphis and not Bob, he decided to retreat. Meanwhile, Payne escaped with the ransom and headed to a repair shop where he had hidden the Annex B flash drive. Unbeknownst to him, Bob had hidden in the trunk of his car. At one moment, Bob ambushed Payne, seizing both the Annex B drive and the ransom. Elsewhere, Lon Scott's henchmen captured Julie and Mary, holding them hostage. They were brought before Lon Scott, Isaac, and Payne. Upon learning that his family was captured, Bob furiously contacted Isaac and demanded a meeting. The next day, Isaac met with Bob, who proposed in exchange his family for Annex B and the ransom. Isaac agreed and promised to assist in resolving the issue. Isaac later met with Lon Scott and Krukov to discuss Bob's proposed exchange while Bob and Agent Memphis observed from a distance. Confident in their leverage, Lon Scott and Krukov agreed to the deal. Bob then managed a brief phone call with Julie. Using the call, Agent Memphis traced their location, allowing them to plan a rescue mission. Once they identified the location, Bob rushed to the scene with Isaac and Agent Memphis. While Agent Memphis kept watch and monitored enemy movements, Bob and Isaac infiltrated the area. After taking down several guards, Bob was dismayed to find that his wife and daughter were not there. Meanwhile, Lon Scott had set up his Black King rifle, aiming for Bob. However, Bob outsmarted Lon with a clever tactic and managed to escape. Bob and Isaac regrouped and modified their strategy. Bob then confronted Lon Scott again, proposing a new deal. He offered Lon a chance to shoot him during the exchange, which Lon eagerly accepted, not realizing Bob's true intentions. Shortly after, Bob arrived at the location where Lon Scott had arranged the barter. Isaac and Agent Memphis watched the situation from distance. Soon, Agent Memphis noticed two cars facing each other as if preparing for an exchange. One car drove away, while the other approached Bob. Inside was Payne, holding a shotgun to Julie's head. Mary, however, was nowhere to be seen. Lon Scott then took a shot at Bob, but missed. Unknown to him, Bob had previously sabotaged his Black King rifle by swapping the bullets during his earlier visit. When Lon Scott fired a third shot, the rifle exploded due to the modified bullet. Severely injured, Lon Scott succumbed to his injuries. Seeing Lon Scott dead, Isaac shot Payne in the arm, allowing Bob to rescue Julie. Enraged, Julie killed Payne when he refused to reveal Mary's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Agent Memphis, who had been tracking the other car, called Bob to inform him that Krukov's henchmen had taken his daughter to the Russian embassy. Determined to rescue her, Bob and his team quickly devised a plan. Agent Memphis learned that the Russian ambassador was attending a meeting elsewhere. Julie confronted the ambassador, explaining that her daughter was being held at the embassy. At the same time, Isaac, acting as a federal agent, backed her statement, urging the ambassador to return to the embassy immediately. Meanwhile, Bob prepared to infiltrate the embassy by posing as the ambassador's bodyguard. Elsewhere, Patricia Gregson, a former national security advisor, confronted Krukov, demanding that he release Mary. Krukov initially dismissed her, believing she held no authority over him. However, the Russian ambassador soon called Krukov, angrily insisting he resolve the situation. Krukov feigned innocence and assured the ambassador he would handle it, confirming the ambassador's ignorance of Krukov's actions. When Bob reached the embassy, security initially barred his entry for lacking identification. The Russian ambassador intervened, allowing Bob inside and disavowing any involvement with Krukof's extreme actions. He granted Bob permission to search for his daughter. Later, Bob found Mary and swiftly took her away. Once safe, he reunited her with Julie and advised them to stay at a nearby motel until he resolved the situation. Bob then contacted Isaac to confront Krukof. It was revealed that Krukof accepted, but only dispatched his men to kill Bob while secretly heading to the motel, using a tracking device he had planted on Bob's daughter. Prepared for the ambush, Bob, Isaac, Agent Memphis, and FBI agents stood ready to counter Krukof's assault. Meanwhile, Krukof arrived at the motel and confronted Julie, demanding information about Annex B. However, Julie had no idea about Krukof's real intentions. When she couldn't provide the answer he wanted, Krukof opened fire on her motel room. Terrified, Julie quickly called Bob, informing him that Krukof had arrived at the motel and was threatening them. Acting swiftly, Bob devised a plan to lure Krukof away from the motel. After carefully calculating his move, Bob managed to shoot Krukof from a distance, ending his threat. Despite his heroic actions, Bob was still a fugitive and a suspect in the assassination of the president of Ukraine. As a result, he was immediately arrested by the police. Later, Bob, his lawyer, and Agent Memphis met with Patricia Gregson. At that moment, Patricia offered to clear Bob's name and ensure his freedom if he handed over Annex B. However, Bob firmly stated that if Patricia wanted Annex B, she would have to retrieve it from the Russian embassy, where he had left it. Eventually, it was proven that Bob was not involved in the assassination, leading to his release and his name being cleared. To resolve the political fallout, the FBI and authorities crafted a narrative stating that Lon Scott had orchestrated and executed the assassination independently. This story excluded any involvement from federal agents or Russian officials. With his name cleared, Bob was finally reunited with his family, bringing the story to a close. So the moral of the story is, if you're going to fake your death, make sure you also fake a titanium bone, because apparently that's the key to pulling off the ultimate gotcha moment. Also, when in doubt, blame the guy with the fancy rifle. It's probably his fault anyway.